David Carle, sadly, will not be the next head coach of the Chicago Blackhawks. I'll go over the top options that are still available and the good news on prospect Nick Lardis.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, a quick reminder to like, comment, and subscribe, all that good stuff. Go and follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey as well on X. That way, you don't miss out on any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And one final shout out goes out to today's sponsor as well, which is Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox. No console needed. Just head on over to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more today. All right, thank you again, everyone, for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Tough news here to open things up on the show today. It's actually the reason I'm getting an extra episode out over the weekend. I wish it were different, but Denver Pioneers head coach David Carle, two-time national championship winner and two-time World Junior gold medalist, as the United States have gone back-to-back, has reportedly withdrawn his name from the Blackhawks coaching search over the weekend and will not become the new bench boss here right now in this rebuild. But it wasn't without an aggressive pursuit and pitch from the Blackhawks. We know from multiple reports that to be true. And also based on what we heard from Frank Saravalli a couple of weeks ago, David Carle was the man the Blackhawks had circled going into this process. But sadly, it isn't going to be happening at this point in time. And obviously for lots of Blackhawks fans out there, myself included, this news is pretty gosh darn disappointing, as Carle was obviously the hottest name on the market. And while, yes, he would have been yet another first-time head coaching hire here for the Blackhawks, I still thought he was as good of a fit as it was going to come in this year's head coaching free agent market. And as I outlined when Saravalli first reported that Carle was the man who the Hawks had circled, I thought this was as pretty good of a fit as it was going to be for him entering the NHL with the Hawks. Obviously, being an original six franchise with our incredible fan base that's stuck with them through thick and thin here throughout this rebuild and really tested our patience. Obviously, they have lots of money to spend moving forward to help improve this roster. Connor Bedard in a very deep prospect pool. A lot of those guys which are already familiar with David Carle, either, being Aiden Thompson at Denver or the slew of guys who played under David Carle for the United States at the World Juniors. He's played against a lot of those guys when they were in the NCAA and whatnot. And then also, I just thought it was a really good spot for Carle to be a first-time head coach, considering it's a really prestigious job. And also, well, yes, it is time for the Blackhawks to start taking steps. There's not that true pressure to go in, win, and take this team to the Stanley Cup final immediately. I think it would have been about as good of a spot for David Carle to be a first-time NHL head coach, but isn't going to be happening, unfortunately. But it does make me think, if it's not going to be Chicago, I do wonder if David Carle is going to be leaving Denver at this point in time. And I've seen a lot of reports from respected NHL sources kind of saying the same thing, that the Blackhawks, it really felt like a match destined to happen. And I really believe, Blackhawks fans, that David Carle was going to be the next head coach, considering how aggressive the Blackhawks were clearly making it known that they wanted him to be their guy, right? I thought now was going to be the time, but if not Chicago, I'm guessing it's not going to be happening this year for David Carle. Not to say it's impossible, but we'll have to wait and see. Not going to be happening with Chicago, though, we know that for sure. And what this means for the Blackhawks, thinking about it here now, with David Carle officially out of the mix, Mike Sullivan, by the way, sounds like the Pittsburgh Penguins are going to be bringing him back for at least another season. That takes, personally, my two top head coaching candidates off of the market. And there have been some other guys that I've talked about here recently, such as, Jay Woodcroft. Todd Nelson has been someone who's firmly been part of my top three since this process all really started and we knew the Blackhawks were going to be going in a different direction. I'm sure Anders Sorensen will be getting his interview with the Blackhawks. I'm actually a little surprised how outspoken he was about wanting to return, but he is still going to get his interview. And by the way, interviews have not yet begun for the Blackhawks. It seems like Kyle Davidson is really taking his time here now, especially that David Carle, their reported top guy, isn't going to be in the mix. I expect those interview processes still to begin sooner rather than later, based on what we heard Davidson say during his exit interview, that they'd like to get on top of this sooner than they did in the process with Luke Richardson. And I believe he was hired in early June. So they probably want this done, by the end of May, if I had to guess. And just looking at the candidates who are out there right now officially, like the only two that really stand out to me, in my opinion, are Jay Woodcroft and Todd Nelson. Like I said, but both of them come with some question marks. While Jay Woodcroft did do some good things with the Edmonton Oilers, it was a very short tenure there. And Todd Nelson doesn't have a lot of NHL experience. Yes, he's done a ton of good things in the AHL, and I do believe he's going to firmly be in the mix now for the Blackhawks with David Carle out of the conversation, but they're still not like the slam dunk candidates like a David Carle or like a Mike Sullivan if Pittsburgh wouldn't have retained him like they did. We'll see what winds up happening. And I do wonder if now that those two guys seem officially off the market for the Blackhawks, I wonder if this is influence Kyle Davidson's thinking about the hiring moving forward, because if it's not a slam dunk candidate, and listen, I still like Todd Nelson, and I know there's not going to be a head coach coming into this thing that's completely flawless. Even David Carle, who is my top guy and sounds like the Blackhawks top guy, obviously comes without previous NHL experience. I still like Todd Nelson. I still like Jay Woodcroft, but they're still not that slam dunk options to me. I wouldn't be mad about them being hired. Let me know in the comment section if you kind of feel the same way, Blackhawks fans. And also let me know who's now your top candidate with David Carle out of the market. I'm sure these interview processes are going to be happening soon. I'm sure we'll be hearing who officially the Blackhawks are going to be interviewing. We'll also see if someone like Rick Tocchet, what winds up happening with him in the Vancouver Canucks, although he doesn't really have all that impressive of a head coaching resume other than the Canucks winning their division last season. And then we know what obviously happened with them this year. So we'll see the names ultimately that the Blackhawks give out interviews to. I expect one to be Todd Nelson. I'd expect one to probably be Jay Woodcroft as well. Let me know who else you would want to see the Blackhawks give interviews to as well. But those are probably my two top guys at this point in time, now that David Carle is officially out of the mix. There are my thoughts on that, and the top guys seemingly available at this point with the Blackhawks. Really expected to ramp up their head coaching search here soon. Coming up in just a moment, Blackhawks fans, make sure to stick with me as I'll dive into the Rockford IceHogs making quick work of the Chicago Wolves in their best-of-3 play-in series. Real quick, though, I do got to talk to you all first about Monarch Money. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's real easy to lose track, but that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and complete control over your finances. And Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center so that you can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place, and stop just managing your money and start building wealth. And what I personally love about Monarch is that instead of juggling multiple financial apps at the same time, you can just use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan your long-term goals. So go and take advantage and take control of your finances right now with Monarch Money by using the code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps at monarchmoney.com, and you'll get 50% off on your first year. Again, that's monarchmoney.com with our code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps for 50% off on your first year. Segment 2, how about the Rockford IceHogs making quick work of the 4-seeded Chicago Wolves in the best-of-3 play-in series with a quick 2-game sweep, sending them into the first round after a 5-0 win at the BMO Center in Game 2. They'll now move on to the first round and take on the Milwaukee Admirals in a best-of-5 series. But an electric Friday night performance from the IceHogs. Kevin Korchinski finds the back of the net for the second consecutive playoff game. Jerry Mayhew tallied 2 goals. Joey Anderson found the back of the net. Aku Ratu scored the empty netter for good measure. It was a fun evening at the BMO, but the real number one star of the game, just like in Game 1, Blackhawks fans, was Drew Commesso, who's been absolutely incredible since returning from injury in February, as I've outlined on these last couple of shows. And even when I went through my goaltending outlook for the Blackhawks a couple of days ago, I mentioned Drew Commesso. Based on the incredible run that he was on late in the season, do the Blackhawks want to give him an opportunity to compete for the backup job next year? If they bring back Arvid Soderblom, that obviously mucks things up a little bit more. But Commesso has been able to ride that momentum into the Calder Cup Playoffs so far and had a 34-save shutout on Friday night. He's now 2-0 in the Calder Cup Playoffs with an impressive .985 save percentage. And even more impressive than that, Hawks fans, like I said, is the run that Comesso's been on since he's returned from injury back on February 15th. In 18 total games, including these 2 against the Chicago Wolves, Commesso has now stopped 483 of 514 shots faced. Quick math, that's a .940 save percentage during that stretch. Absolutely incredible stuff. And despite there being some bumps in the road for Drew Commesso this year, and I know based on what I saw on social media, there were some Blackhawks fans a little bit concerned about his potential. Obviously, Spencer Knight being added to the goaltending mix. He's now the number 1 moving forward. That makes things questionable a little bit for Drew Commesso. But I've said the entire time, and the same reason why, even though things obviously didn't finish as well for Arvid Soderblom as they started this season, you don't quit on the young goaltender because you just don't know what's possible. And while there were some bumps in the road, certainly this season for Drew Commesso, in an episode probably about a month ago in this point in time, I talked about, I think it was either Scott Powers or Ben Pope. One of those two wrote up an incredible article about Scott and about Drew, and he talked about how his roommate, Landon Slager, while he was called up to the NHL, that left Drew living alone for the first point in time. He was dealing with some inconsistencies in his game with Rockford. He suffered an injury as well, kind of dealing with some personal problems, but he found ways to kind of get through that. And I believe he's been actually seeing a psychologist as well. But either way, he's been able to overcome all of that and play probably the best hockey, undoubtedly the best hockey of his pro career when it's mattered the most for the IceHogs down the stretch of the regular season to secure them in that 5 spot in the Central Division. And then in these first 2 games in the Calder Cup playoffs, giving up 1 goal in 2 starts. Huge reason why the IceHogs are moving on into the first round where they'll face off with Milwaukee. Should be a lot of fun to see those 2 teams go head-to-head. The IceHogs obviously have a lot of more support coming down on their roster after all the NHL experience these guys got late in the season. Kevin Korchinski, we're seeing it pay dividends on the offensive side of things here in the playoffs. Artem Levshinov obviously had the awesome game winner in Game 1. Ethan Del Mastro's been on the top pairing, playing his offside with Korchinski. Nolan Allen rounding things out, being a defensive staple on the third pairing, and then obviously Drew Commesso being the number 1 star in between the pipes. And there could be even more support coming for the IceHogs here in the first round. Colton Dach was not able to suit up in Game 2. I talked on the last episode how he was officially reassigned from the Blackhawks, missed the last couple weeks of the regular season up in the NHL due to an elbow injury. Seems like he's going to be able to return at some point in that next series against Milwaukee, according to head coach Mark Eaton. Didn't, officially make the timeline super clear, but sounds pretty likely that we're going to see at Colton Dach at some point, hopefully by, Game 2 or Game 3 at the latest. Never know what's going to be possible for Game 1, maybe even. Marek Vanacker, did not draw into the lineup for game 2, has not been in the IceHogs lineup for either of their 2 playoff games. And if he didn't get in the play-in series, I don't know if he's going to get in at all against Milwaukee. Not to say that it's not possible, but not likely at this point in time either. They probably just want to be giving him some practice reps, I'd imagine, along with the big league or the pro level guys before I assume he's going back to Brantford for his final year of junior hockey, where he'll be a head honcho there for the Bulldogs. As far as the schedule goes for this next round series against the Admirals, game 1, circle the calendars, Thursday. That'll be May 1st in Milwaukee, obviously, as they're the top seed from the Central Division. Game begins at 7 p.m. Central Time. Game 2, also in Milwaukee, is then 2 days later, Saturday, May 3rd, starts at 6 p.m. Central Time. Game 3 will be back in Rockford at the BMO. Extra day's rest because of the travel. Wednesday, May 7th in Rockford with a 7 p.m. Central starting time. Game 4, if necessary, then 2 days later, again in Rockford, Friday, May 9th with a 7 p.m. Central start time. And then Game 5, if we get to that point, a winner-takes-all matchup, that will be on Sunday, May 11th, back in Milwaukee with a 4 p.m. Central start time. There is everything to know before the IceHogs match up with the Milwaukee Admirals in the first round of the Calder Cup Playoffs. Awesome to see this young group continue to get great experiences and really rise to the occasion, right? Kevin Korchinski with goals in back-to-back games, Artie Levshinov, the OT hero in game 1, and Drew Comesso being a brick wall in between the pipes. Been a lot of fun for the watching the IceHogs here in the Calder Cup Playoffs so far. Coming up in just a moment, before I close out today's episode, Blackhawks fans, I'll get into the injury update that we finally got on 2023 third-round pick, Nick Lardis. First, though, I do got to talk to you all briefly about Wonderful Pistachios. Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Well, then go and crack into a great source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts, with each 1 ounce serving having 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily nutritional value. Plus, they're packed with fiber to help keep you feeling fuller longer. And who doesn't love a good pistachio? I know I certainly do. I could literally sit there eating them and cracking them all day long. And the satisfying crack of opening each shell, it's like a mini snack meditation. And whether you're running between meetings or dropping off the kids, Wonderful Pistachios are the snack that works as hard as you do. So get snackin' and get crackin' with the snack that packs a protein punch right now. Go and check out wonderfulpistachios.com in order to learn more. Again, wonderfulpistachios.com to check it out today. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, yo team every day. Just wanted to say thank you to everyone for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen. Here to start off your day. For your second listen, make sure to go and check out the new Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night, up until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale with Locked On NHL Game Night, which you can find right now on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. Segment 3, Scott Powers of The Athletic, doing the Lord's work, finally giving us an update on prospect Nick Lardis. And while the 2023 third-round pick did not officially give us what he suffered, the injury exactly that he suffered in game 2 of that second-round series against the Oshawa Generals, didn't divulge that. He did at least let us know that nothing because of this injury is going to hamper him long-term. There isn't going to be any surgery required. He's not going to have a long-term absence, which is all we really needed here, Blackhawks fans. Good news regarding Nick Lardis' future because of this injury, which, by the way, I don't think I mentioned on the show, but Andrew Gibson, who went knee to knee with Nick Lardis there in game 2, which obviously changed the tides of that series completely as Brantford went on to lose the next 4 games. He was suspended for 2 games for that hit on Nick Lardis, but ultimately knocking out the most influential player in that series, really went on to hinder Brantford. But great news here for the 20-year-old Lardis, especially when he's going to be heading into pro hockey following a phenomenal final season in the OHL, becoming the first player in the league to score 70 goals since John Tavares and becoming just the 8th player in league's history. So great news there for Nick Lardis. And then, as well as him letting us know that he's going to be all right, I also like to hear Nick Lardis when Scott Powers asked him about what he's going to be working on heading into pro hockey. He outlined how he needs to pay attention to detail a little bit more, needs to work on battling, and definitely needs to get stronger as well. And that's going to be the thing that we're going to talk about with Nick Lardis as he enters pro hockey. Whether he's going to start with Rockford, maybe he makes a push for the Blackhawks opening night roster. Regardless, he's going to have to get stronger and work on those one-on-one battles, because being only 5'10", 5'11", $180, $185, depending on where you're looking at, that's going to be the weakness of Nick Lardis' game. We know he can absolutely rip it, and we know he does a good job at finding the soft spots in those zones, but it's not going to be as easy as it was in the OHL as it is against grown men at the next level. But I just like to hear Nick Lardis at least recognizing, definitely the aspects of his game that I think we all know he needs to work on here this summer. But super promising news that Nick Lardis dodged long-term injury. Nothing to worry about long-term because of what happened in Game 2 of the second-round playoff series against the Oshawa Generals. But speaking of the OHL playoffs here real quick, Blackhawks fans, something I haven't talked about on the show in a couple of days just because everything that's been going on is an update on the OHL playoffs. I believe the last time I talked about this was when the Windsor Spitfires and the Kitchener Rangers were now even 3-3 going into Game 7. Well, believe it or not, the Rangers completed the comeback 4 straight after being down 3-0. They won Game 7 in epic fashion in overtime to move on to the Western Conference Final, taking on the London Knights. Jack Bushman, obviously, as I outlined, was huge in the Rangers' comeback effort. AJ Spellacy did get back into the lineup for Windsor in Game 7, missed Games 2 through 6, I believe, but unfortunately was too little too late for Spellacy. He actually also has joined on with the Rockford IceHogs like Merrick Vanacker did following Brantford getting exited from the second round. Because both of them have signed their entry-level contracts, they're able to join on with the Rockford IceHogs at this point of the season. But I think just like Merrick Vanacker at this point, it's probably just to give both of those guys some pro reps. And while AJ Spellacy did hang around longer in the preseason and in training camp than anyone anticipated, I still think it's pretty likely that he heads back to Windsor for one final season of junior hockey. There's no real reason to be rushing him onto the NHL scene right now unless, he goes and has another performance like he did last fall. I mean, who's to say he doesn't force the Blackhawks' hand once again, and now he's a little bit older and more experienced to give the Blackhawks a legitimate thought about it. Not to say that isn't possible, but I think going back to Windsor is probably the favorite at this point in time, just like it is for Merrick Vanacker to go back to Brantford because it's OHL or NHL for both of those guys. But Jack Bushman and the Kitchener Rangers, their OHL playoff run continues, although they're going to have their hands full in the next round and already do, meeting up with the top-seeded London Knights, an absolutely stacked roster. They dropped both of the opening 2 games of that series out in London and now trail 2-0. Pridham did pick up a primary assist in the 6-2 loss for the Rangers in Game 2. That now gives him 11 points, 6 goals, and 5 assists in 14 total playoff games. We'll see if the Rangers have one more miraculous comeback under their sleeves. That's what it's going to take to best these London Knights 4 times over the next, 6 games? That's what it's going, or next 5 games, excuse me. I'm not going to say it's impossible considering what Kitchener has already done, but like I said, definitely going to have their hands full. That's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks, though. As always, thank you all again for joining the show. Make sure to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube if you enjoy what you're watching and haven't done so already. Follow Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. Until next time, everyone, enjoy the rest of your weekends. I'll see you on the next episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.